Hey super friends, my name is Neil and welcome to this episode 107 of the Get Your Comic Con podcast. We're here fortnightly-ish to bring you a slice of film, TV and pop culture goodness from our studio direct to your audio-visual device. Okay, it's not been 2 weeks, it's been 3 since the last podcast, but Boy Wonder was ill, I was looking after him, it's been really busy, but we are back, and this episode I'm going to be talking to you about a couple of films that I've seen recently, Saltburn and The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. We're going to wrap up some of the latest news, and of course it would not be an episode of the Geico podcast without including some comic book talk. So without further ado, let's dive into some news headlines, shall we? First up in the news, it has been a ridiculously busy period for James Gunn and the production team on Superman Legacy. Ahead of the film's July 11th, 2025 release date, the director kind of doubled down on the fact that the strikes hadn't pushed things back too much, and then suddenly the floodgates opened when it comes to casting announcements. So first we got the news, which is still yet to be 100% confirmed, that Renfield and Mad Max Fury Road and Skins star Nicholas Hoult will potentially be playing the role of Lex Luthor, which is very exciting. We don't know if Luthor is the big bad in this film, we don't know how much of a role he's going to have, but presumably Lex could be a major part of the DCU moving forwards. So to have someone like Nicholas Hoult, who is a relatively big name and a kind of fresh face star, is really cool, because we know that Gunn has been kind of looking at slightly lesser known names for some of the major roles, but wanted someone bigger and more well known to play Lex. So then we got the news that they have also cast the roles of Jimmy Olsen and Eve Tessmacher, so they are going to be played by Sarah Sampaio. She is playing Eve Tessmacher, Luthor's loyal henchwoman, as was described in the piece that I read. And then you are also going to have Maria Gabriela De Fara, who has been announced as the engineer, who is one of the Authority, and then Skylar Gisondo, who is playing Jimmy Olsen. So they are 3 really big bits of casting for this film. Pieces all really falling into place. So just to recap, because there are probably more people announced for this film than you kind of think. You've got David Corenswet, who is playing Superman. You've got Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, potentially Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. So then we go Skylar Gisondo as Jimmy Olsen, Sarah Sampaio as Eve Tessmacher, Maria Gabriela De Faria as the engineer. And then previously announced, you have also got Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific, Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl, and Anthony Carrigan as Metamorpho. So a really cool, it's not just Metropolis characters we're going for here. You know, with Metamorpho and a Green Lantern and a Hawkgirl, there are definitely characters from the wider DCU that are coming in here already, so very exciting to see where that goes. But that is some very cool casting news. I want to know what you think. Who have you been fan casting for some of the roles that could turn up in this film? What do you think of all these various castings? Do you see Nicholas Hoult as a Lex Luthor? Please get in touch and let me know. You can find me on social media at Neil Vag on all major platforms. So please do reach out and let me know what you think, because this is really exciting. Production officially does kick off in March 2024, so we are only a few months away now from really getting to the meat of seeing this film come together, and that is very exciting, so can't wait to see what's next. Sticking with DC news, we also got our first trailer for Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. So this was a film that was first announced back at San Diego Comic-Con 2023. We knew that it was going to be releasing in 2024 alongside a Watchmen animated movie. Plenty of rumours about whether this would be a multi-part film, which have now been confirmed, as this brand new trailer, which you can watch over on our website, confirms that Crisis, at the very least, we don't know about Watchmen yet, but Crisis will release in 3 parts across 2024. We don't know release dates yet. We don't even have a cast list yet, but it's pretty safe to say that we'll have Matt Bomer back as Barry Allen the Flash. Got a cat really wanting to get in the way of our filming today. So we have Matt Bomer as Barry Allen the Flash. We're going to have Jensen Ackles as his version of Bruce Wayne Batman. Darren Criss as Clark Kent Superman, and of course Stana Katic as Diana Prince Wonder Woman, who are all returning from their roles in the kind of what's been dubbed by fans as the Tomorrowverse series of films. Could we have characters back from the kind of New 52 era movies? Could we have some flashbacks to characters from, say, Superman the animated series, Batman the animated series, if Kevin Conroy had perhaps recorded some dialogue before he sadly passed away around a year ago? Could be that he had recorded some dialogue. I don't know. I have no insider information on this. This is all just me spitballing ideas. But it certainly looks from the trailer like they're going to be sticking fairly close to the original Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline from the comic books. So very excited to see what they're going to do there. And please do go check out the trailer over on our website, which is www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk. We will be sticking to this one very, very closely. So we'll let you know when we know release dates, full casting and all that kind of shtick. And just lastly, I wanted to touch on a TV series which is coming to Prime Video in 2024, which is based on a film which I remember from back in the day when it was released in cinemas, and that is a brand new version of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. You'll remember the Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie film, kind of the action comedy where they were a married couple who didn't know that each other was a spy. It's been remade into an 8-episode series for Amazon Prime, which is going to be available from February the 2nd, 2024, exclusively on Prime Video. They're going to drop all 8 episodes in one go, so it's going to be a binge watch. And this one is from co-creators and executive producers Donald Glover and Francesca Sloan. The series kind of reimagines that film, which is from 2005. And so Glover will star as John Smith, and Maya Erskine is playing Jane Smith, so the husband and wife. There are some first look images which you can check out over on the website. We don't have a trailer or anything for this yet. But in this version, Mr. and Mrs. Smith are two lonely strangers who land jobs working for a mysterious spy agency that offers them a glorious life of espionage, wealth, world travels, and a dream brownstone in Manhattan. The catch? New identities and an arranged marriage as Mr. and Mrs. John and Jane Smith. Now hitched, John and Jane navigate a high-risk mission every week while also facing a new relationship milestone. Their complex cover story becomes even more complicated when they catch real feelings for each other. What's riskier, espionage or marriage? So that is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which will debut on Prime Video on February the 2nd, 2024. That's it for the news this week. As always, if you want to stay up to date with the latest stories, then head to our website, which, as I said, is www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk, or for the latest breaking stories, I really can't speak today, then make sure to follow us on social media. We're on all major platforms at Get Your Comic Con. That's it for the news. Let's get on with some reviews, shall we? So first up on our review list this week is Lionsgate's The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is currently in UK cinemas now. It stars Tom Blythe as Coriolanus Snow, who you will remember played by Donald Glover in the original Hunger Games trilogy, and it also stars Rachel Zegler as Lucy Greybeard, a inhabitant of District 12 who may find herself caught up in amongst the Hunger Games, as the title may give away. So this film is set roughly 64 years before the original Hunger Games trilogy, so long before Katniss Everdeen ever entered into an arena, and tells the story of how Coriolanus Snow kind of went from a, I guess, down on his luck member of the capital elite to becoming the man that we kind of know and recognise in the original Hunger Games trilogy. It's once again based on a novel by Suzanne Collins, which was released during the COVID pandemic. I think it came out in 2020. I remember the cover being revealed at New York Comic Con the first time I went, which must have been 2019. So yeah, 2020 I guess for the book, maybe 2021. The synopsis for the film is Coriolanus, played by Tom Blythe, is the last hope for his failing lineage. The once proud Snow family that has fallen from grace in a post-war capital. With his livelihood threatened, Snow is reluctantly assigned to mentor Lucy Greybeard, played by Rachel Zegler, a tribute from the impoverished District 12. But after Lucy Grey's charm captivates the audience of Panem, Snow sees an opportunity to shift their fates. And so there's a lot of parallels in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes to events that we saw in the original Hunger Games trilogy. You know, when you think about Katniss, she was plucked out of nowhere to be placed into this huge media machine that was the Hunger Games. And that is something which Snow has kind of been preparing himself for, but it is not maybe prepared for it in the way that it transpires in this film. And there's kind of parallels there for both Katniss and Snow's journey in the later trilogy, between what happens with Lucy and Snow in this film as well. So it's an interesting film because it genuinely has a very different viewpoint to what we've seen in the other three films. It isn't just a cash grab to try and tell more story in this world. It's genuinely a very interesting period of time, which is very, very different than what we've seen before. It's it's very close to what is referred to as the Dark Days. So the capital isn't even the kind of shining beacon that we see it in the later films. It's still recovering from war, and although there's a lot of very familiar production language, in the design and the sound design, it's not the place that it will become, and the Hunger Games are not the event that they will become later on as well. So you're really seeing a lot of the oranges is perhaps not the right word, because this is the first Hunger Games, it's the 10th, but what you're seeing is the kind of impetus for how a lot of the elements of the later trilogy become who, what, and where they are when we find them. So this is directed by Francis Lawrence, who directed 3 of the previous 4 films in the franchise. He did not direct the first Hunger Games. He came on board for 2013's Catching Fire, directed both of the Mockingjay films. And he also brought on board several people who he had worked with on those original films as well. So James Newton Howard as the composer, also Trish Somerville, who is the costume designer, has returned, and he's now working with production designer Uli Hanisch, who did not work on the originals, but takes the design language, as I said, and kind of rolls that back a few decades to make sure that it's still familiar to what we know of the film set in the later period, but he's been able to do something a little bit more exciting in terms of setting it in a different period of time. And really, it's, you're not breaking any massively new ground here. You are just following a character who becomes this sort of amiable guy, even though he's going to become a villain. You sort of learn to hate to love him, as it were. Almost like when you watch Joker and you feel sorry for Joaquin Phoenix, and almost begin to empathise with him, knowing full well that actually he's a really deplorable character, or he's going to become a really deplorable character. So it's a very similar journey with Coriolanus Snow. In Tom Blythe is just wonderful. There's a warmth to the way that he portrays him, which is really really interesting and really different, because Donald Sutherland, I've gone back to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Donald Sutherland is just so cold and lacks any form of empathy, and is just the villain of the piece. So it's interesting to see that actually he came from very humble beginnings, because his family had been ruined by the war, and how really through very similar feelings to Katniss of sort of selfishness, and I feel like that's a slight on Katniss, but when she was called into the games, she simply wanted to survive. And because she simply wanted to survive, she did whatever it took. And that meant either pretending to be in love with Peter, or pretending like they were going to take the berries at the end of the first one, or doing exactly what Coin and everyone wanted her to do during Mockingjay. So here it's Coriolanus that has to go through that. He will do whatever it takes in order to get himself back into a position of power. And it's not ruthless to begin with. It's pure... What's the word I'm looking for? It's... self-preservation is probably the best way to put it. It's pure self-preservation on his part, because he wants to get his family back to where they were, and he will do what it takes. So when we meet him at the beginning, he thinks that he's maybe in line for a huge grant because of his great grades in school that will mean that he can go on and become either head game maker or someone very crucial to the Hunger Games, but without needing to spend money that his family simply doesn't have. So when he finds out that in actual fact to get that reward, what he has to do is mentor someone, and is forced to mentor someone from District 12, that sends him on a very different journey of self-preservation, which puts him squarely in the sights of Lucy Gray-Baird, who is... She has settled in District 12 at the point where she is... I really hate to use this word because it sounds terrible, but reaped. She is a member of what's called a group of the Covey, so they are kind of roving artists who move around the district. So she is a singer, which equally means that this film is also full of songs, which is absolutely delightful because Rachel Zegler has an amazing voice. But just to kind of dial that back a second, the two of them, him protecting her and him using her talent, which clearly captures the kind of zeitgeist of the capital, is just a different and oddly somewhat selfish way for him to be showing self-preservation, which I realise probably doesn't make as much sense as I say it as it does in my head, but essentially him helping her helps him to get where he wants to be. And so there's that inevitable kind of, because this is obviously a YA book, there's that inevitable romance. The two of them do kind of have feelings for each other and give into that, but at the end of the day, his need to show that he wants the power and can take the power overcomes everything else, overrides everything else, and he very quickly in the final act kind of barrel rolls towards where we know him. So it's a little bit fast for my liking. I would have liked... So this film is 2 hours and 37 minutes. And a lot of time is dedicated to the Hunger Games and their relationship and establishing who both Coriolanus and Lucy are when we first meet them and how they are with each other. Less time is spent on his descent towards his inevitable kind of end game. Destiny is the word I'm looking for. So the film could use a little bit more of that. I think to help make the third act and his actions in the third act make a little bit more sense, it needed a little bit more development of his character and that descent towards destiny, as it were, because it feels like he goes from where he is sent out to the districts to become just a kind of peacekeeper to where suddenly he's doing some quite duplicitous things to friends and loved ones in order to get himself back to the capital. So whilst everything that I watched I enjoyed, I just needed a little bit more when it came to the final kind of product. Rachel Zegler, however, is absolutely amazing, and I would happily watch much more of Lucy Greybeard's story. I really want to know what happens to her after the end of this. I would love to know how she came to be in District 12 when the reaping ceremony happens, because clearly she's roved around and spent some time all over Panem, and there's definitely lots of story there, as well as further story that you could tell about the kind of dark days which you glimpse very briefly, and obviously plenty more around the Hunger Games, because really where we end in this film, they still aren't the kind of multimedia juggernaut that they are when you reach the original Hunger Games movie. So there's a lot more story to tell, but this is a very interesting and very crucial part of it, which is very exciting to watch at the same time. I think I've probably said enough about that one. So that's all I want to say about it. If you want to read my full review, it is up on the website now. I said the Hunger Games franchise is revitalised by a trip 64 years into the past. Whilst the arc of its main characters feels a little rushed, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a dystopian tour de force. Blythe and Zegler are incredible as a leading duo. I gave this film 4 stars out of 5, so I highly, highly recommend it. It is in cinemas in the UK and globally now, so please do go check it out if you haven't already. And if you have, then let me know what you think of it. So I've already told you once, but I will tell you again. You can find me on all social media platforms at Neil Vag. So please get in touch and let me know what you thought of the Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, when you go see it. If not, go watch it, because you've got no excuse not to. For the first of this episode's comic book reviews, I want to talk to you about a brand new Batman series, because, we don't talk about Batman enough on this podcast. This is a brand new series called Batman 89 Echoes, which is by Sam Hamm, with artwork by Joe Quinones and colours by Leonardo Ito. The first issue is in comic book stores as of this week. It just released in comic book stores on the 28th. It's a 6-part series set in the world of Tim Burton's Batman 89 and picks up 2 years after the last Batman 89 series, which was actually 2021. I thought it was last year, but I've just looked it up, and it was 2021 when that first Batman 89 series took place. So it's been a while, but we are back. It is 2 years later in terms of the story, and Batman has mysteriously gone missing from Gotham. Let me read you the synopsis. So you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. After Harvey Dent's crusade against Gotham and Batman, the Caped Crusader has disappeared without a trace. In his place, ordinary citizens have taken to the streets to root out crime. As innocents get hurt, the question on everyone's mind is the same: where is Batman? Sam Hamm, screenwriter of the Batman 89 movie, and Joe Quinones reunite for another tale in Gotham. So I've read issue 1 so far. I haven't read anything more, so no spoilers here. I'm going to keep it light, but issue 1 is a really, really cool new opening gambit in a story set in the kind of Tim Burton Batman 89 world. They laid out all of their kind of supporting cast in the first chapter. So in the last series, we met Barbara Gordon, we met Bullock, we met some of those key players in Gotham that we hadn't seen in the original movies, but they've been established now, and so there's a supporting world around Michael Keaton's Batman, which now means that this comic can kind of function and hit the ground running a little bit more this time around. So we very much enter this world through Barbara Gordon in this version. It starts out with a crime. You think you've seen Batman. You quickly learn that there are members of the public who are acting as Batman to try and root crime out, as it says in the synopsis. But inevitably, when someone, like me, who is not a vigilante, decides to put on a costume and go out to save the day, the bodies start mounting up. And so Barbara Gordon is kind of our viewpoint into this world at this point, where she wants to know what on earth is happening. Where is Batman? What is he doing? Why has he disappeared? Why has it been 2 years since anyone has seen him? And yet she also has to keep one eye on Bullock and the rest of the GCPD, because they're kind of aware that she seems to know more than she's letting on. So, spoilers just quickly for those who may not have read the last chapter, but it did end with Barbara finding out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and the only reason that she didn't turn him in was because she learnt from her now sadly deceased dad, Commissioner Gordon, that they had been working together and that they had quite a strong working relationship. So she gives Bruce a break based on the fact that there was such a close connection with her father. And so that's kind of called into question when she goes to visit Alfred and finds out that even Bruce himself is missing, not just Batman. So there's a huge mystery there around where is both the Dark Knight and his alter ego in this current version of Gotham, and what has happened to him. We're introduced to a trio of villains in this this first issue for Echoes. There's two who are on the front cover, one of whom I wasn't quite sure who it was for a second. I thought for a moment they were going to try and do a kind of Earth 1 Martha Wayne as Joker story, which would have been very, very interesting, but no, it's actually the introduction of Dr. Q, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, who is really brilliantly introduced to this series. We first see her on City Beat, which is like a TV news kind of morning breakfast television magazine type show, where she is kind of a psychiatrist who does some pop culture stuff. She obviously is known in the media, and she is there talking a bit about the Joker. Although there's an interesting kind of potential retcon to Batman 89, which it's just a minor beat in the story, but I'm very interested to know how and why that kind of happened here. But we meet her. She is also working at Arkham Asylum, obviously, which establishes that as a location. We'd never seen it during either Batman 89 or 1992's Batman Returns, but that has been really established in Sam Hamm's world as a key location in Gotham. And working there with Dr. Quinzel is a Dr. Jonathan Crane. So that tells you the second of our villains that we're going to be meeting in this book, which is going to be really exciting to see. So there's two very key Batman villains there. And there is also a strange kind of slightly isolated story which features Firefly. I'm going to presume that they're going to coalesce pretty quickly because this is only a 6-part series. But there is an appearance by Firefly which may well tie into perhaps what Jonathan Crane is doing in Arkham. May also have some connections with where and why Bruce and Batman has disappeared, but yet to be explained within this first issue. Great story. Joe Quinlan's artwork is amazing. He picks up all of the design language from those movies, from all of the production design, the characters, the actors, the setting. I think a great way to just kind of give you an example of that is Harley Quinn. She almost looks like Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. I don't know why I keep wanting to say 1992's Batman Returns. She has the 80s hair, the 80s fashion. It just looks really cool. It just takes you straight into that world that Tim Burton created. And it's almost effortless in kind of moving from film to page, which is very, very cool. It doesn't feel like an attempt at recreating it. It just is that world further continuing to exist, which is very, very cool. So it's a 6-issue series. Issue 1 available now in comic book stores and on digital platforms, and that's called Batman 89 Echoes. So please do go and pick that one up. Next up is a film which I actually haven't written a review for on the website. I wanted to keep it exclusive to this podcast because it's really difficult to articulate my thoughts on it because it's just that crazy. And that film is Saltburn, the brand new release from Emerald Fennell, writer-director of the absolutely breathtaking Promising Young Woman that came out of nowhere and took us all by surprise a couple of years ago, starring Carey Mulligan. It's so difficult to really talk to you about this film without spoiling certain things, but I'm going to be very, very careful in what I say. I'm probably going to keep this one quite brief as well, because again, similar to Promising Young Woman, Saltburn is a film that you need to experience. I don't think any form of kind of reading a review or watching a trailer really prepares you for the experience that you get. And again, that's so similar to Promising Young Woman. What Emerald Fennell does is she just creates these really rich textures, this really rich world that these characters exist in, and although it's really melodramatic or kind of hyper aware, it's just it really sucks you in and puts you in the middle of everything that's going on, and you go on this roller coaster ride where, yes, there is an inevitable twist, which, you know, people will see coming, certain aspects of it, but maybe not all aspects of it. But you're so engulfed in the story of the film that you kind of don't really care that you perhaps know where it's going. So just let's go through the cast list quickly. So the two leads are Jacob Elordi, who plays Felix, and Barry Keoghan, who plays Oliver Quick. Obviously, people that are regulars on this podcast will know Barry for his role as the Joker in Matt Reeves' The Batman. It also stars Rosamund Pike and Richard E. Grant. Perfectly cast, both of them. Rosamund Pike is comedic genius in this film. It also stars Alison Oliver, Archie Madekwe, who was in the GTA movie recently, and Carey Mulligan is in it as it's just a small kind of cameo part, but she's again absolutely brilliant. Ewan Mitchell and Sadie Sutherall are also in this. And I should not leave out Paul Reese, who plays Duncan the butler at Saltburn, because he is absolutely brilliant in this film as well. Was it really GTA? Is that the right film? Was it actually called that? No, Gran Turismo. See, I always get those franchises mixed up. So you would know him as the lead in Gran Turismo. Saltburn, I need to get a synopsis for this film. So let's see what IMDb says, shall we, quickly? So, a student at Oxford University finds himself drawn into the world of a charming and aristocratic classmate who invites him to his eccentric family's sprawling estate for a summer never to be forgotten. It's a film never to be forgotten. Really, this film hinges on the performances of its two leads. So there is a really, like, fizzy kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Bond doesn't sound like the right word. Chemistry is the word I'm looking for. There's a really fizzy chemistry between Jacob and Barry. They are fantastic. So Felix, played by Jacob Elordi, is this aristocratic, popular boarding school boy who has gone to Cambridge University, and Barry, playing Oliver, is his polar opposite. So what you learn about Oliver is that he has maybe not got the best family history. He's very much a loner in his first year, where Felix is surrounded by this group of kind of the popular, beautiful people. It's set in 2006, 2007, so everything is just so... I mean, that's when I was in my third year of university, so for me, everything just feels very, very... It just feels like my teenage years. So Felix has the kind of the shaggy hair that I used to have. He has the eyebrow piercing I used to have. Unfortunately, I may be a Felix, only I don't come from a house that has 127 rooms. They are very much from different worlds, but they collide one day when just they have what I saw Emerald Fennell refer to on Twitter as a meet cute. I don't really know what that means, but they have this meet cute, and it kind of starts them on a very beautiful friendship, which does have some kind of homosexual undertones to it, though that isn't something necessarily which is fully explored on screen. And there is just this kind of really scintillating, as I said, fizzy chemistry between the two of them as they kind of fall in love as best friends. And Felix just loves to spend time with Oliver because he just always wants to fix and help people. He has that really typical kind of upper class self-awareness that he knows he comes from this background but is also not aware of what that means, and so he just naturally wants to help those who he sees as having less than he does, and so he's almost trying to fix Oliver in a way, and Oliver just desperately wants a friend and seems to fall haplessly in love with Felix. And that means that he gets invited back to Felix's house, which is Saltburn in the title, and he spends a summer there, and that includes Felix's cousin Farley, played by Archie, and various members of his family, including his mum and dad, played by Rosamund and Richard E. Grant. And basically, this is where I have to get really careful with what I say, because I don't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it, although I don't know why you're watching this if you haven't, because please do go watch it. But essentially, there is a kind of descent into... Madness is the wrong word, but there is a descent towards something far more terrifying and unnerving, which really makes Saltburn a kind of visceral, guttural, class horror thriller. And by class, I mean the divide between the kind of working class and the upper class. So there is very much a comment on the classism of British society, and it's just so typically Emerald Fennell at the same time. And Barry is deserving of any awards recognition that he might get for this film, but he is incredible. Every moment that he is on screen, he absolutely demands attention. It's unbelievable. And huge props to Jacob Elordi as well. Firstly for the British accent, which is absolutely outstanding, but he just knows exactly how to counterbalance the way that Barry is. So when Barry is playing Oliver as this really kind of enigmatic and just slightly disturbed young man, Jacob as Felix is just balancing that out perfectly with a weird mix of this kind of hapless, helpless, but so well-meaning kind of humour, and I can't say sort of salt of the earth because he isn't. He is, born with a silver spoon, but he just has an innocence and a naivety to him that really counterbalances this sort of slightly more manipulative and calculated person that Oliver can be when he switches. It's not like a Jekyll and Hyde thing, but it's not too far away from that kind of idea of there is this the version of Oliver that people see, and that is a construct of his, and then there is the version that is him being his real self, and what that means and what he wants to achieve by being more of himself. And that leads you through some really interesting twists and turns throughout the story, right up to an end point, which is one of the most kind of, I don't want to say baffling because it's an amazing moment. It's one of the most left field moments I think you'll see in any film this year, and you will never listen to Murder on the Dance Floor by Sophie Ellis-Bextor the same way ever again. But right throughout, it's just so massively entertaining and unexpected, and in many ways parts are unpredictable. You might have an idea as to what it is that is going to happen, but you will never in a million years figure out drinking tea at the same time. You will never figure out the context and the events by which things will happen, which is what makes it such a strong and satisfying payoff when you reach the conclusion. And that really is all I can say about Saltburn. I would give this kind of a 4.5 stars out of 5 because it's one of my films of the year, as was Promising Young Woman, to be fair. They're just these kind of really fresh, unpredictable films that come out of nowhere to really surprise you and really grip and entertain, which is great. So please, 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 if you have not seen it, go out and see it while it's still in cinemas. It will come to Prime Video in the very near future. I don't think there's a release date yet, but it's currently doing a select theatrical run so that it can be it can qualify for an award season, which it absolutely deserves, as did Promising Young Woman. I didn't even talk about Carey Mulligan's character, who is like a Helena Bonham Carter kind of figure. Just brilliant. Every piece of set design, every piece of costume design, every piece of casting, everything in this film is placed for a reason, and that kind of meticulous detail I really have to praise because it is wonderful, wonderful filmmaking. Even if it is not necessarily the type of film that you would normally go out and watch, it's so worth it. So please, please, please do. So that is Saltburn in UK cinemas now. Last up, I'm going to talk to you about a comic book, which is a franchise tie-in, but it is not a DC comic book. This is an IDW comic book. This is Star Trek, which released issue number 14 last week. It's written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, who you will know I interviewed on this podcast at San Diego Comic-Con for their work on Batman Beyond. They have revitalized Star Trek in comic books through this brand new series that kicked off last year. Now we're on issue 14. So it kicked off last year at IDW. They have told a story which is set in a different version of Star Trek's kind of future to Picard, but it is a similar sort of time period. So this is kind of picking up where the TV shows left off in the 90s and telling a different type of story for what happens in that future. They've done a huge event which is called Day of Blood, which happened over the summer, which crossed over with a second Star Trek series, which is running called Star Trek Defiant. This is not a scenario where you kind of need to be reading both Star Trek books to know everything that's going on, though you do for the crossover. They are both very standalone in terms of their stories. And so following Day of Blood, we're now in a brand new arc called A Savage World of Glass and Bone, which is the latest story which is playing out in just normal Star Trek. And this is the second part of that. So the synopsis for this is Captain Sisko and the crew of the USS Theseus team up with Starfleet operative King Snake, aka Harry Kim from Star Trek Voyager, to stop the war-loving Tzenkethi from launching their fleet across the quadrant. Unfortunately for Starfleet, however, the Tzenkethi leader has a surprise guest of his own who will stop at nothing to thwart Starfleet's plans. Meanwhile, when the crew is greeted by continuous and frightening earthquakes, Dr. Crusher realises there is more going on to the planet than they may be able to survive. So it's written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing. Artwork is by Marcus Toe with colours by Lee Lockridge and letters by Clayton Cowles. You can pick up the first 14 issues now, but that's the creative team for this issue, which is issue 14. I gave this one 4 stars in my review over on our website, and I said, if the Day of Blood event cemented that Star Trek was here to stay, then A Savage World of Glass and Bone is the perfect way to build on those foundations. Fast-paced storytelling and a shock ending and even more character returns. What more could a Trek fan ask for? And that's why I just wanted to talk about it quickly before we wrap up on this week's episode, because what they are doing is a really brilliant way of contextualizing Star Trek for a contemporary audience. It has some of the action-adventure sensibilities of the J.J. Abrams movies, which are obviously more bang than they were character, although obviously they never ignored character. But this, what Colin and Jackson are doing, really still sticks with the character sensibilities of those 90s Star Trek shows. They really have the core of each of those characters who they've brought back for this kept the way they were when we last saw them on TV. They haven't tried to kind of recontextualize anyone's story. They've just moved them on slightly and then put them in this version of Star Trek that has a little bit more bells and whistles going on around it. So very much exploration, very much still sci-fi, still very much recognizable as Star Trek, but just told in a really refreshing new way that works very, very well in comic book format. And this story has been really interesting. I don't quite know where it's going yet. This is one of those things that I really can't predict, which is also very nice for me as a reader to not be able to predict exactly what's going to happen. Because when you think that there's 900 odd episodes of Star Trek out there in the world, sometimes it's difficult for those of us who know it so intimately to be able to sort of go into a new story without having either really heavy preconceived notions as to where it's going or actually just being able to guess the plot. And that's very much not what's happening. We get to see Harry Kim in this issue. We find out what's been going on because he has been looking after B'Elanna Torres and Tom Paris's daughter. So why on earth is he now in the middle of a war zone with a child? And that brings in another character that I won't spoil here from the Voyager era. And it's just this really wonderful love letter to that era of Star Trek and what it means to its fans to see what it could have been like if they had more connective tissue between each of those shows. So, there are Next Generation characters, there are Voyager characters, there are Deep Space Nine characters, there are Lower Decks characters that have shown up in this world. This is really Star Trek Legacy, which we all want to see on TV, but this is their version of what Star Trek Legacy would look like in a comic book form, and it's really exciting. So that's all I wanted to say about it, because I don't want to ruin any of the mystique around this brand new arc, but please do go check it out. So this new arc, which is called A Savage World of Glass and Bone, kicked off last month in Star Trek issue 13 and continues in issue 14, which dropped in comic book stores last week. You can pick those up anywhere where all good comic books are sold and on digital platforms now, so please do. And again, as always, get in touch, let me know what you think, and if you have any recommendations for comic books that I could cover on this podcast, then please do reach out and let me know, because I am always interested to hear about things that I may not have picked up that you are reading and that you are absolutely loving. And that is it for episode 107 of the Geico podcast. We'll be back in a couple of weeks when James will be joining me once again, because we want to talk to you about a film that we went to see just very recently as I'm recording this, which was Godzilla Minus One, which is the brand new Toho Japanese Godzilla film, which you've heard us talk about this before. I've talked about various trailers. James and I talked about this on the last episode as well. It's the kind of World War II, post-World War II set Godzilla movie, which is absolutely tearing up cinemas around the world, and we have now seen it. We both loved it and can't wait to talk about it. So he's going to be coming back on to help me co-host and to talk about that. We will have plenty of other things that will have happened in that time as well. We may have seen Wonka. Ooh, who else knows what else might be coming very, very soon. But exciting times are ahead as we head into the holiday season. So until next time, please do stay safe, stay well, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye. Thanks for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button just down below and hit the bell so that you can get notified whenever we release brand new videos. In fact, there's 2 more waiting for you to watch right here below. So what are you waiting for? Why not click play?